Welcome back to Tom's Datsun Garage. In today's video, I'm going to show you the techniques that I use to take damage out of stainless steel before the polishing process. I'm going to give you a brief recap of the repairs I've already done years ago, and that'll help set the stage for today's video. While the 240Z's body was away at the body shop, I decided to dig out the stainless steel trim to do some polishing on it. This is when I discovered at least one or two of the pieces were damaged, and the damage had to be removed on those pieces before the polishing process. I had gone to Harbor Freight and I picked up a 6-inch buffer, as well as a bench grinder stand, which I had to slightly modify to get the bench grinder to mount to it, as well as the two different types of compounds to use with the buffing wheel. Picked up a few bits of safety gear as well, just for good measure. Right, we are ready to polish. So, I started with the best pieces that didn't have any damage, and I started polishing them first, just to get the bulk of the work out of the way. Well, that was kind of addicting. It all worked really well, and I was getting great results pretty much right away. So I went through those pieces relatively quickly. But then the pieces came up that had damage done to them, and there was no getting around it. I had to take the dents out of it before I could polish them. So I'm going to show you the tools I used, and I'm going to show you the process I used to straighten these out. These pieces are mostly flat. There was very little re-radiusing that needed to be done, and it was more about removing the dents than re-radiusing parts. I used a few different hammers and some plastic trim tools, as well as the back of my bench vise as the anvil. I covered that up with some towels to help soften the blow just a little bit and minimize marking up on the shiny side as I was pounding the dent out from the inside. I started by tapping lightly and upping my pressure with the hammer with more forceful blows as needed from the inside with something that closely matched the slight arc of the relatively flat trim piece. Now, it took a while to get it right, but once I got it as flat as I possibly could, the next step was to use metal files and take long passes down each trim piece to file it flat. File all the high spots flat. I next started with sandpaper and went from about an 800 grit and worked my way up to about a 1500 to 2000 grit in different stages. Once all the sanding was done, I went and used the buffer to put the final polish and shine on each piece. I was so proud of the way things turned out, and it was going to be quite a while before they would go back on the car, so to protect each piece, I wind up covering them all in a painter's tape, which has an adhesive that won't stick to it and make it all gummy and gooey when it comes time to unwrap these pieces and put them back on the car. But now it's time to work on today's trim, which is going to be the driver's side drip rail molding. This dent in the driver's drip rail molding was caused by a ladder falling over onto my car back when my garage was a complete mess many years ago. Once I get this dent out and I file it and sand it and polish it, the rest of the stuff is just straight polishing. This is the last of the damage. So I'm going to pull back here and show you my workspace. When you're going to hammer out some kind of dent in your trim, it'd be a good idea to use a piece of wood with something on top of it just to help not put as much markings into the shiny surface of the piece you're trying to work on as possible. I'm going to be using different hammers. Here's my metal file. a chisel, a small punch, and some trim tools, as well as a very small bench vise. I'm going to start by getting the trim piece, because it's kind of big and awkward as far as length, into a comfortable working position so that I can concentrate on hammering out that dent from the back side of the trim. Here you can get a pretty good sense of how I've got it set up. To work through the back side of that dent. And I have a block of wood underneath that towel. It's a shop towel. And then I have the small bench vise to keep it on a level plane, because I want that angle to be just right where it's easier to knock that dent out from the inside. Here I'm going to set it up and step away from the camera a bit and try to hit it from the inside with a fairly blunted chisel. The radius of the blunted chisel is close enough to the area I'm trying to knock the dent out of where I'm not concerned with doing any additional damage. So I'm going to start by trying to hammer straight down by twisting this just a little bit and using my medium-sized ball peen hammer to start. Hit and look. Hit and look. Okay, already starting to see a nice difference there. Okay, now it's getting to the point where I'm going to need to get in a little bit underneath that lip, but this piece here is raised up and won't let me quite get the angle I need to get the rest of that out. So I'm going to switch over to my smaller punch, just like that, and repeat. Hit and look. Hit and look. Okay, now let's see how this turned out on the other side. Not too bad. A few raised spots, but not too bad. I hope this shows up on camera. Now I've got a bit of a problem because here on this edge it's also pushed in just a bit. Reshaping that is going to be a little more tricky because the actual metal itself that's visible has to go that direction, and I have to flatten it out just a little bit. So to do that, I'm going to try tapping that against the wood block. Let's see if I can get that out. It's just a very slight bend right there. Now, I'm going to try to readjust this and get it fixed into place a little better so I can do that. Alright, there we go, remounted up. Now I need to take a small dent this way, and I have it clamped into this as tightly as possible without re-bending this into a different shape. So I want it to be held firm, just enough to where I can tap that dent out. That's really good. I hope that shows up on camera. You can see just a little bit of damage right there. I'm going to see if I can get that just a little straighter. It's pretty good. I'm going to use the more blunt end of the hammer and kind of knock down that sharp edge just a little bit. You don't want to go wailing the tar out of it, you just want to do just enough. Not bad. That's pretty good. I'm going to see if I can improve that at all. Definitely getting closer. That's pretty darn good right about there. I don't know how that looks on camera, but I believe we're ready for the next phase, which is going to be using the metal file and knocking down all the high spots caused from pushing the dent back out on this side, on the shiny side. So let's try the file next. Use a good metal file, and I'm probably going to wear gloves for this next part because you don't want to stab yourself with anything sharp, and it gets a little bit dirty with metal filings. Now that we've come down to the filing part, I'm going to use a metal file and make passes like this, long passes. And it's going to take just a small layer of metal off each pass. And you'll see a bunch of deep scratches showing up in your trim work. That's okay. These will eventually get polished out by the sandpaper part, which comes after the filing part. And we'll go over that when we get there. But during this part, you want to make sure that you knock down the high spots as best as possible and have a nice even finish throughout. This process does take a while. This will also show you where low spots still are, and you can re-hammer these areas as needed to push them back out even further, because you can see how the file's not even touching that area. So I'm going to go ahead and address these areas with the chisel and the hammer some more, and then I'll get back to filing. Alright, after a few different sessions of switching back and forth between filing down the high spots to find the low spots, and then getting back behind it and using punch and the chisel to knock up the low spots, I believe I have achieved a satisfactory result. Alright, now that I've finished with the filing part, I've got the high spots knocked down and the low spots were all knocked up from the inside here. You can kind of see, hope that shows up on camera, where I was pushing against it on the inside with the chisel piece. But on this side, there's no evidence of it. Everything's been nice and evenly filed down, and this part is now ready for the sanding process. And I'm going to start with different grades of sandpaper and work my way up to a finer one, and then I'll hit it with the buffer, and then this piece will look good as new. Alright, I'm going to start here with this 320 grit that I found. This is all automotive grade, wet or dry, body shop style sandpaper. I'm going to start with the 320, and then I'm going to move to 600, then 800, then 1000, and then 1500. The sanding process is pretty boring and repetitive, so what I'll do is I will just show you the results after I am done with each grit of sandpaper. Okay, here we go. This is after the 320 is done. Hope you can see that difference. Pretty much all the file markings are completely gone, and everything is in about 320 grit finish, which is exactly what we were looking for. Next up is going to be 600, and then I'm going to follow that up with 800 after that. $600. All right, now we're going to move it from 600 up to 800. Next, we're going to move up to 1,000. And finally, we're going to move up to 1,500. After this, I'll be putting it on the buffing wheel and see how it looks after a good buffing in. But as of right now, kind of see it looks pretty even and fairly shiny. It's looking a lot better than it was when it was just filed. So I'll continue on with 1,500 and then we'll run it over to the buffer. And now we're done with all of the 1,500. It's got actually a pretty decent shine to it. It might have been a little overkill. We probably could have stopped back at 1,000 before hitting the buffer, but I'm just going to go over this with a little brake parts cleaner. Kind of make sure there's no sanding grit on this from the sandpaper. All right, see, took a little bit off there. And give you a look. Time for the buffer wheel. Alright, well, we've already covered buffing in the last video, but I'm going to go ahead and give this thing a few passes just to see how it looks. I don't know how that's going to show up on camera. I'm going to try it with just a little bit more rougher cut, and then I'm going to go to the final polish. Now I'm going to try the super fine polish. See how it turns out. Alright, I'd say that's pretty successful. I hope that shows up on camera. Well, I hope this gives some of you out there hope that if you have any problems with your stainless steel, on how to fix it as far as straightening it. Just because a piece has a dent in it doesn't mean that it's trash. It's very possible that it can be saved, and I hope this video proved that to a point. My next video, I'm not really sure what my content's going to be because I've pretty much covered everything about the stainless and aluminum that I could. The rest of it's going to be taken care of off camera as far as just polishing it because we've already covered all that. I do have one little glimmer of positive news to share with you. Here is a look at all of the items that made it up to and back from the platers. And that's everything. Thank you very much for watching as always. I appreciate each and every one of you. We'll see you next time.